Steelhead were first stocked in Lake Superior in the late 1800s. Real good fishing, 60s, 70s, and 80s again. And then we started to see declines in those populations. The Knife River Steelhead Trap was built around that same time. That gives us the ability to monitor steelhead populations. So we can only monitor steelhead populations really two ways. It's the Knife River Steelhead Trap and it's through our crib survey. 2.76653.
Hi, I'm Nick Peterson with Lake Superior Area Fisheries, Minnesota DNR. This is Cory Goldsworthy, Lake Superior Supervisor for Lake Superior DNR. We're here at the Knife River Fish Trap today to check for steelhead that are running up here in the spring.
The fish trap was originally built in 1996 to monitor steelhead populations in the Knife River. The Knife River has the most spawning habitat of any of the tributaries along the North Shore, so it's an important steelhead resource for us. The trap has undergone some modifications after some floods, but overall we use this trap annually to track steelhead abundance through time. It also helped us to evaluate stocking programs in the past, and it's a spring operation that we spend a lot of time and resources on from essentially the 1st of May through the 4th of July.
Yeah, so this is the adult side of the trap that will catch the upstream migrating adults. And we open up these doors here, and there's a gate right here. There's an opening down at the bottom. So when we get here in the day, we put this in, and now the fish are trapped, and we're ready to lower the water level and see what's in the trap. So the Knife River Trap is typically opened as soon as the ice comes free of the river, and we can effectively and safely get in here to set everything up and get it running. We'll capture steelhead right away in the spring as they come. Even in those really cold conditions, there'll be fish that are hanging out, waiting to get in the river. So we'll capture some right away. Once those adults go upstream, we'll actually catch them as they're coming back downstream, along with some juveniles that are born up there. So the eggs that are born above the trap will hatch out, and those young will be in the river for 1, 2, 3 years, and we will capture them coming back down so we can estimate the number of the successful reproduction that occurs from the adults that we put up in a given year. What's going to happen from here is one staff member is going to come down into the trap, and we're going to take lengths and weights of the fish down there. They'll be handed up and brought up here to these holding tanks where we'll tag them, check them for disease, and record all the data and information that we need from them up there.
This is our little holding pens that we have for steelhead. It helps us to work up 4 fish at a time. Makes the process a little more efficient, a little more easier on the fish. This is where we'll get our length, weight, sex, tag the fish, take a scale sample. So we'll run 4 fish up here, work up the fish, bring them up, and then we start again. So we're able to do 4 at a time. Gets us through the job a little easier, a little quicker, a little more safe for the fish.
Yeah, so Cory, the gate up there is the water control valve that brings water into the trap. So what Cory's doing is closing that gate. It's going to drop the water level within the trap. That allows us to get down in here, and it'll be 3 feet instead of 6 feet deep in here. Fred is going to get down into the adult trap right now. He's going to set up our scale for weighing the fish. Measuring board down there, so he's going to measure the fish. He's going to transfer that data up to Cory. He's going to hand the net to Cory and bring him over here to our holding pens, where then we're going to continue with the fish workup up here with tagging and checking for lamprey wounds and everything else that we need. So one thing that's very important that we do here, if you can look at the falls here at the Knife River and you come up to the trap, you can notice that we don't capture all the fish. There's access for them to go around us during certain flows. And our goal here isn't to capture, we don't need to capture every single fish that comes up here. And that's why we use tags. We actually put a tag in their back before we release them upstream. And we will actually catch the same fish moving back downstream later on in the season after they're spawning. And by the ratio of the fish that we tagged or marked and the fish that come down without tags, we can get an estimate of how many fish actually ran the river without actually having to handle every single fish that comes up here. So it gives us a better population estimate than, say, just capturing and relying on the fish that we capture within the trap itself. Let's go see what we got. So steelhead are one of the most diverse trout species that we have here in Lake Superior. Their life history and life history diversity is pretty complex, where they're mostly a lake-oriented fish, and they utilize the rivers in the springtime right now for spawning.
So we got our 4 fish out of the trap. We've got our data on the data sheet. First fish, second fish, third fish, fourth fish. Now we'll grab each fish, work them up, check them for fin clips, which would tell us that they're hatchery fish. Look for sea lamprey wounds, look for tags, get a scale sample if we need it, run them up above the trap and start over again.
This will be fish number 163 for the season. As you can see, it's already got a tag from a previous year. I got this for you. So this is a 185314.
That's a drop back, right?
185314. It's very likely that this fish was already tagged this spring. So early on in the run, this fish came up and we worked it up. We tagged it and everything, put it up. And that fish decided, it's too cold up there. I'm gonna turn around and go back to the lake, and it came up again. So this is the second time we've caught it this year. So now we'll move on to the next one. We're done with that one. We've already got the scale samples. We get scale samples to estimate age of each individual fish that comes up here. We've already got scale samples from that fish because we already caught it this spring. So we'll move on to the next one, see if we can find a new one.
Checking the paired fins for clips, checking the adipose for clips. No clips, no tags, no tag stubs, no lamprey wounds. We can tell this was a female first by just looking at it. You can tell the front section here is a little more robust. And then just by giving it a little light squeeze, you can see it's expelling some eggs. So this is a ripe female, she's ready to spawn. Most of the females that we've seen so far have been green, so you'll see that they're a little more round, but when you go to try to expel some eggs, nothing comes out. So it's good to see a good mix of green and ripe females coming out.
Yeah, so now what we're gonna do is collect some, the other side here, collect some scale samples for aging. So it's just a nice little tickle on the back, and those scales come right off. Get those on our knife, put those in our envelope. I know that's fish 164. And then next we're gonna give it a numbered tag. And so the Knife River, any fish that we capture here gets a gray tag with a series of 6 numbers on it. It says Minnesota DNR. If you do catch any of these fish, be sure you report them to us. We like to know where they're getting caught and where they're going. So we'll give this fish a tag, and it gets inserted right in the back here. Just like that. Then we record that number. It's 185354. Now we're on to the next. As you can see, these fish aren't worn out from being caught. These fish are fresh and ripe from the lake. That water temp is 40 degrees right now. They're feisty and ready to go, so handling them can be very, very difficult.
So here we got a steelhead. No clips, no tags. It does have a damaged right rear. Doesn't look like a clip, it looks like it's damaged. We've got a lamprey wound.
For classifying these lamprey wounds, we have a guide, classification guide that people use all throughout the lake to identify whether or not it's a fresh wound. And so if that fish, if the lamprey just fell off that fish, or if it's an old wound that's been healed over, that happened in the past and it's healed itself. So this one here, Cory, based on the classification, what would you call that one?
Looks like an A4. So it did have a pit. You can tell that it got into the flesh, but it's starting to heal over. Sea lamprey invaded the Great Lakes through the Welland Canal, which was built to allow shipping around Niagara Falls, so Great Lakes access to the oceans. Sea lamprey came in and essentially in every other Great Lake they wiped out lake trout other than Lake Superior. Lake Superior was the only Great Lake to retain any wild lake trout population. Right around 1956 is when TFM, or the chemical lampricide that we still use to kill sea lamprey in the rivers, was developed, and it's been ongoing ever since. Treatment is an annual thing, and without treatment there would be no commercial sport, charter fisheries, tribal fisheries. Even though we've controlled sea lamprey, their populations are reduced by about 95% of what they historically were. Without treatment, they still kill more fish than the sport, charter, commercial, tribal fisheries combined. So they're still having a big impact on fish populations in the Great Lakes. So we're releasing them back above the trap, get them a little ways away from the front of the trap so we don't see them again, and send them upstream. There they go. We start over.
All right, so steelhead rainbow trout in Lake Superior are one of the most diverse, have one of the most diverse life history strategies of any of the fish out here. And they're mostly a lake-oriented fish. They live in the lake most of the year, but they utilize the rivers in the spring for spawning. Once those adults come up here into the river and spawn, the juveniles that they produce after a number of years, they also want to go out and use the lake as well. So when they're 1, 2, 3 years old, we'll capture the juveniles coming back, making that transition. We call it smoltification. They smolt, they go to the lake, grow big, and then they come back as adults in subsequent years, and the process continues.
So in the smolt trap here, typically we'll start seeing the age 1, age 2 and older rainbow trout coming out of the river, typically towards the end of May and into June. Up in the rivers, they're protected. There's enough habitat there. We want to see more age 2 and older smolts coming out, because we know if you're an age 1 juvenile steelhead heading out into Lake Superior, your survival is really low. So the more age 2 and older steelhead we see leaving the trap, in theory we should see more adults coming back from those age classes. We think the age 1s that leave are typically being driven out in warmer years by water temperature. So in these lower stretches of the Knife River where there's not a lot of pool habitat, not a lot of cold water habitat, when that water temperature increases, we think those age 1s just look for somewhere else to go, and that would be out to Lake Superior. And then once they hit Lake Superior, they're vulnerable to predation by lake trout or brook trout or burbot or any of the other predatory species we have out in the lake. Fish. There you go.
Yeah, so we got 3 fish in the smolt trap today. It looks like juvenile brown trout. Juvenile brown that's probably 2 years old. And we got a couple really little guys here that, if we can get them to cooperate, are little juvenile steelhead. Those are, given the size of these ones, this is probably a 1-year-old smolt, is what we call it. And that's probably the same age as well, a 1-year-old smolt that's leaving early. Now this is the size. We would like them to stay in the stream longer than this. And the 1-year-olds being this big, we want them to get to be this big before they go to Lake Superior. And we know by running this trap over the last 30 years that that's going to increase their survival in Lake Superior almost 100 times. So this little fish right here, you can say good luck guy. There's a lot of things that would be able to eat this small fish. So the bigger you are out there, the better chance of survival that you have, the better chance to avoid those big whopper lake trout that we have that are living out in the big lake.
steelhead were first stocked in Lake Superior in the late 1800s. Soon after that, spawning runs pretty much occurred around the lake. Real popular sport fishery all the way through 1940s, 50s, 60s, really big. Steelhead fishing, Chinook fishing, coho fishing. That was kind of a time period in Lake Superior where it was probably the most imbalanced because sea lamprey had wiped out or almost wiped out lake trout. So your top level native predator was in very low abundance. You had real big smelt populations come through. And people remember the heyday of smelting and Chinook fishing and a real good steelhead fishery during that time period because of high smelt populations. We're kind of to a different point now with smelt because we've rehabilitated lake trout. So we have a really high lake trout population. That smelt population is suppressed, so there's not as much bait fish around as there used to be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Through time with steelhead, real good fishing, 60s, 70s, and 80s again. And then we started to see declines in those populations. And there was enough concern in the decline of those populations that regulations had declined through time up until the point of the mid-1990s where we went to a catch and release only fishery. The Knife River Steelhead Trap was built around that same time. That gives us the ability to monitor steelhead populations. So we can only monitor steelhead populations really two ways. It's the Knife River Steelhead Trap and it's through our creel survey. The creel survey is we deploy creel clerks out into the field. They interview anglers. How long have you been fishing? What are you fishing for? How many have you caught? Are any of them clipped? So asking them information on steelhead, and that gives us an idea of how many fish people are seeing in the rivers where we don't have a fish trap. Recently we've done a lot of genetic work looking at potential introgression with another strain that we had stocked called Kamloops. Essentially we found introgression almost everywhere we looked. So that allowed us to shift our stock strain from that Kamloops domesticated strain into the new wild steelhead strain. So another part of our operations is here at the French River, collecting adult fish, spawning those fish out. That helps to replenish our brood stock through time, which then, we stock those young fish out. And that new program really gives us the opportunity to make sure that the fish that we're stocking are genetically similar or genetically the same to the fish that the wild fish anglers are catching out in Lake Superior.
Back in 2016 or so, we started a steelhead genetics program where we have been utilizing volunteer anglers on the rivers to collect scale samples, and those scales hold DNA, or pieces of tissue on the scale holds the DNA where we can analyze what kind of interbreeding was occurring naturally between our stocked fish and our wild fish. And it wasn't just anglers that provided those scale samples, so we were collecting some genetic data here, or genetic material here, that we're also analyzing from the fish traps that we run, and along with reevaluating our broodstock lines. And we found that introgression was widespread, it was occurring, and there was potentially some issues. But an important aspect to the shift that occurred between stocking our Kamloops strain that had been stocked for 40 plus years here at the French River and shorewide to provide harvest opportunities, and shifting it over to more of a naturalized, genetically similar strain to what is out in Lake Superior and has been here since the late 1800s, was really vested around research that's been done over the last 30 years at this office. So basically what we were finding is the reproductive output from that hatchery strain when they would breed with the wild steelhead, 45 to 70% of the juveniles that were produced or could be produced when a Kamloops got together with a steelhead were basically not surviving. And so you've got a significant impact on reproduction that's naturally occurring when a hatchery fish gets together with the wild fish. And so to counterbalance that, that was really a lot of the driver behind switching over to, let's maintain a strain that's been here since, the late 1800s, and provide a stocked fish that if it spawns with a wild fish, we're not going to see those negative consequences of poor juvenile survival. And ultimately, we hope that, you know, by making that shift, our steelhead populations are going to become more resilient. The juveniles are going to survive a lot better, and there's going to be more fish to catch. That being said, moving forward, we've gotten beyond the cam loops and aggression side of things, and moving forward, a very interesting question is, what are our fish? So our, you know, all these steelhead that are here right now originated from the West Coast at some point since the 1900s. Cory had pulled together some data and evaluating how many different types of strains of steelhead might actually be in Lake Superior at what's been stocked over time, and I think it was like 46 different strains or something like that, or hatchery sources that these fish are comprised of. What we don't know and one thing that we look to gain moving forward is, you know, what are our fish? What are these steelhead that we're capturing at the Knife River Trap? Are they fish from the Columbia River Basin? Are they from the McCloud River system in Northern California? Now that we've started this program with volunteer anglers and collecting all this great genetic data, you know, one exciting thing moving forward is can we start to collect the information from those genetics to be able to tell what origin are these fish, or are they just a mix of those 46 different strains that we had seen? And as you compare that among different populations around the lake, we may or may not find differences in the fish that run, say, the Wisconsin Brule versus our North Shore rivers.
So the biggest limiter for Lake Superior and our non-native salmon populations, whether it's brown trout, rainbow trout, Chinook, cohos, the biggest limiter we have is the habitat in Lake Superior. A longtime researcher on Lake Superior said it well. He said, Lake Superior is not a salmon lake. It's barely a good lake trout lake. It's a really good Siskiyou lake. Siskiyou are the deep water form of lake trout that live, you know, greater than 300 feet. And if you look at a depth map of Lake Superior, the vast majority of Lake Superior is over 300 feet deep. So it's deep, it's very cold, it's relatively unproductive compared to, say, Lake Michigan or Lake Huron. So we don't have the alewife populations that Lake Michigan does to produce Chinook salmon populations like it can. You know, our water is cold, and that really limits the prey fish populations in Lake Superior, and that limits the predator fish in Lake Superior, especially for, again, our non-native salmon species. They're used to ocean water temperature. That's their preferred temperature, is higher in the, you know, the 50s or even low 60s. And the vast majority of the year on Lake Superior, that might be the top 2 or 3 feet of water from maybe July to early September. So that water temperature and productivity are really the two limiters for the most part for any of our non-native salmon populations in Lake Superior.